So glad you could all join me today. I'd like to welcome you to Dovetail Learning's webinar on curiosity and kindness and what they have to do and how they lead us into empathy and compassion and what the distinctions are between empathy and compassion. It all rests inside of the We Are Resilient approach that we are bringing out and sharing. I'll be talking with you about that. And first, let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Chuck Fisher. I'm a transpersonal psychologist. I'm the director of transformational learning at Dovetail Learning. I should say a little bit about transpersonal psychology. It's the study of human well-being from cross-cultural perspectives. Eastern, Western, Native, Oceanic. It's the exploration of what does it mean to be well? What does it mean to be a growing, living human being inside of this incredible experience of life, which goes from the mundane to the spiritual. And we won't be talking about that directly, but it's connected to this conversation today. And I'm very excited to be having this conversation with you. It's a little bit one-sided because it's a webinar, but I want to invite you to put anything you want in the chat. At the end, I'll take a look at the Q&A if you have anything there. And I appreciate and welcome your participation in those ways. If we have time, I'll open it up to dialogue and have people raise hands and have a back and forth. So with that as a beginning, let's move into a little bit more about Dovetail. We are about exploring how to be the best possible versions of ourselves. And we put it in the framework of resilience. Our mission is to strengthen resilience in both adults and children. Dovetail trains educators, healthcare workers, families across the country. And it's such a privilege to be able to do that because our stand is for a world of kind and connected human beings. Another one of our stands is to make all of our work available as an open education resource. And what does that mean? Well, it means that anyone can download and use our work for free, adapt it, and use it for your community. When you use it, our International Creative Commons license asks that you give attribution to Dovetail, collaborate, share back. If you produce anything using our work, the license requires that you share it alike, which is also to publish it as an open education resource. So there's a lot of room for creativity, a lot of room for modification. Much of what we've learned and what I'm sharing comes from others. So please dive in and help us all continue to learn. Our agenda today is we'll begin with a centering practice because resilience is anchored in our own centering, our ability to center. And we will then look at the We Are Resilient approach just very briefly to hold the conversation today inside of the full approach. We will look specifically at what gets in the way of resilience because that's so important to accessing kindness and curiosity, empathy and compassion. If we don't know what's getting in our way, it's very difficult to live fully, as fully as we might wish, I should say, in our empathy and compassion. Then we'll look at two key parts of the approach, the mindset of curiosity and the skill of kindness. And we'll look at how they matter and how they matter specifically to empathy and compassion. And what's the difference between empathy and compassion? So with that as a preface, I'd like to invite us into a moment of what we like to call presencing our own state of being. We also call it one of the first, actually the first centering skill in our list of skills is noticing myself. And we're going to do that today. Briefly, I will ring this singing bowl if it'll show up in my camera. And I'll say a few words to guide us into presence. And then I'll ring the bowl again. So we'll begin from wherever you've been in your life today. Invite you to come into your center. Notice yourself and locate yourself in your body. Locate your body in wherever you're sitting or standing, and in the location you are in the room. And with that, I'll ring the bell. And simply invite in a moment or two of pausing. Pausing in the course of our day, course of our life, just to be present here, now. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to notice the breath. Just bringing your awareness into the breath as it breathes you, the rise and fall, and particularly the sensation, the feeling, the felt sense in your body as the breath comes into your lungs and chest. As it moves through your whole body, belly, expansion of chest and shoulders. And let's just all reflect on the miracle of the breath, presence, our own consciousness. In the context of this space we're exploring today. So with that bell, I invite you to come back to the room you're in, open your eyes. Let's come back to our state of being. And, it's helpful just to notice ourselves and each other, and invite you to use the chat and just put in the chat your own state of being. And when we notice ourselves, these are the kinds of things that we show up with on any given day, any given moment. Open, present, curious, distracted, here, full or overwhelmed, sometimes anxious, interested, happy to be here, stressed or grateful. We're here with our human condition. And that's what we're going to explore today. Our own human condition, and how what we can learn about ourselves impacts our ability to empathize and be compassionate, and how that works for others and why it all makes so much sense. Um, uh, Thank you, Susan, for putting in open-hearted and grateful. It's great to have participants engage actively. So please do that at your own comfort. And while you do that, if you want to continue doing that, feel free. I'm going to locate this conversation, this webinar, inside our approach to well-being, which we call We Are Resilient. And We Are Resilient has several components. The first is resilient mindsets, the mindsets of curiosity, choice, and courage. What changes when we take on the attitude of being fully curious and alive in the moment of wondering what's going to happen, or what can I learn, or what is here for me? Choice, being curious is a choice. There's so many choices, and there's a spectrum of choices in the way that we behave. And courage, which is about following the heart. Courage is about taking a stand on our values and holding boundaries and being strong. So our resilient mindsets matter, and they guide us into our access of this state of resilience, which I'll define in a few minutes. The next part of the We Are Resilient approach are our patterns. And we've identified two sets of patterns that are critical to resilience. Cultural patterns, which gives us a cultural type of resilience. We are going to look at both of these today because they are so important to curiosity, kindness, and empathy and compassion. And our protective patterns, how we react to the world. And then lastly, what we articulate and train are the three sets of skills: resilient skills, skills for centering ourselves so we can be fully in ourselves, wholly authentic and present. And we call that personal resilience. Skills for connecting with others, the skill of how to be in relationship to another person. And we call that relational resilience. It's key to our life flow as human beings, as is collaborating, being with groups, family group, work group, teams, community, culture. And we're not going to go very much into the skills. We're going to look at the patterns and then a couple of pieces that are key to empathy and compassion. So let's define resilience. And we love this definition from Ann Maston from the University of Minnesota, one of the premier researchers in resilience. And she calls it an ordinary superpower. We all have it. We all are thrown off balance every day by something, and we find our way back into our current our personal balance. It's not rare or special. It's the everyday magic of being human. I had a little upset with my wife this morning. Took a walk down the street, found my ground. We came back together, found our relational resilience, and then we're able to collaborate on how we move forward. So yes, we have this ordinary superpower. We use it all the time. And it sits inside of the greater experience of life, which is that life can be a storm. COVID was a storm, personal illness, fractures in relationship, all the things that happen. Your car breaking down might feel like a storm. And then beside the storm, all the things that really get to us is what I love to call the miracle of life itself. And we're going to move towards that miracle when we think about empathy and compassion, because they're very closely related. But what are the miracles? The miracles are the relationships that we get to have, that our body is doing okay, or that it can heal. I've had some major health issues in my life, including a heart attack and heart surgery, and it's a miracle that I'm still alive. You may have not have experienced something quite so dire, but we all have things that throw us down, and the miracle is the presence of life itself. And love this quote from Albert Einstein. He says, "There's two ways to live: as if nothing is a miracle, or seeing that everything is a miracle." Wow. That's something I strive for and I work towards every day in my own resilience practice. How do I walk down the street with my eyes wide open to the miracle of what's occurring without getting lost in my inner dialogue, which is very much tied to empathy and compassion? And we'll look at that together. So, as I said at the very beginning, one of the most important parts of understanding empathy and compassion, as well as curiosity and kindness, is what can get in the way. What can get in the way of our resilience, our capacity to bounce back and be whole, and specifically what can get in the way of curiosity, kindness, empathy, and compassion. And we're going to start with the protective patterns. And if you've been through some of our trainings or you're familiar with this work, I encourage you to lean into it. There's always more for me to learn as one of the key architects and developer of this work. And what is reactive resilience? How we react to the world. And we'll do this briefly, but it's important to anchor to understand what we love to call the human condition, because we all have all these protective patterns. We all distrust. We're all hypervigilant. Distrusting is both helpful and harmful. It's important to distrust before I get too vulnerable with another person. I need to build some trust. It's important to not trust a particular place that could be dangerous, and to be streetwise and wary. But it's also harmful when I doubt myself or others, and that gets in the way. Being hypervigilant is being on high alert. I had to be hypervigilant growing up in an alcoholic family. I needed to know where my dad was and what his emotional state was, because I didn't want to get blasted. So I became hypervigilant, and then that's continued with me in many ways. And I've tracked it into my perfectionism. Having perfectionism is a quality of hypervigilance that both helps me and can get in the way. It helps me do great work, and it also causes me to get lost in my work. So distrusting and hypervigilance. We have 6. The next 2 are hyper caretaking and avoiding. They're kind of related in opposite ways, or maybe even the same way. Do I over prioritize others at my own expense? I've got that one in spades. Always wanting to help, wanting to protect, wanting to be the hero, and that can wear me out. And this is a big one in our culture, particularly for women who have been enculturated over centuries and much longer than that, to be the caretaker in the family, and that can turn into codependency, hyper caretaking, doing too much and not taking care of ourselves. Avoiding is one of my favorite. I love to avoid. If we all didn't avoid, we would be in trouble because there's so much coming at us in the world today. If we didn't step away from that and not let it in, it would be overwhelming. So withdrawing and retreating is very useful. Like I said this morning, I got in an upset with my wife and I needed to step away. I withdrew. I avoided the situation in the immediacy of it so that I could gather my wits and be more helpful in our interaction. And then the last two are defending and attacking. And as we go through these, just kind of keep in the back of your mind these ideas of curiosity, kindness, empathy, and compassion. How do these all fit together? When I'm defensive, I'm acting like others are judging me. It's holding myself away sometimes because I get reactive. If I'm attacking, I'm quick to be on the offensive. It's the aggressive position. So we have aggressors and we have reactors, and a defender can flip and turn into the attacker. Someone says something to me and I get defensive and then I go after them. All this stuff. Oh man, human relationships are something, aren't they? The beauty is we all have these. And so just think for a moment about what's moving in you right now. When we first developed this work, I knew that my primary were avoiding and defending. And I had all the evidence for it. And as I've continued to develop the work and teach it, I can see how I have every single one of these, how they operate in my life. And think about how what you experience impacts your ability to be curious and to be kind and have empathy and compassion for others. Thank you for playing the game here with me, Susan. Hypercaretaking and avoiding. Oh, I love those. Although they can really mess things up for me. Get in the way. If I try and do something for someone that they don't want me to do it, it causes a fracture in the relationship, right? If I avoid, if I and I'm reading what you're writing, if I think that caretaking is being kind, which I do, sometimes it's the expense of the other because they really can do it. I mean, of course, caretaking, actually, you're making a really good distinction here. Caretaking is kind. We take care of others and we are kind. But hyper caretaking is doing that at the exclusion of ourselves. So let's hold those protective patterns as part of the context here of understanding how we access curiosity, kindness, empathy, and compassion, because these can get in the way. Next, I want to look at cultural patterns. Another one of the key patterns that we have identified at Dovetail. And we did a lot of research to put this approach together. Cultural resilience is about the strength we get from each other, from our culture, from all the learning that we've done over ancestral information being passed along from our culture in our family. And cultural resilience, the resilient part of cultural patterns, welcomes all of us, all parts of us, race, ethnicity, religion, countries of origin, gender, sexual orientation, abilities and disabilities, the language we speak, the age that we are. And when we look at some of the patterns, we can get a little closer to how they can also cause problems with cultural empathy and cultural compassion. So we break it down into these puzzle pieces that shape our identity. They're unique to us. So what we inherit culturally, what we is passed down intergenerationally, our community norms, like how close do we get to other people? Some countries very close, others farther away. What do we express emotionally in our community norms? The religious traditions that we have, which are wide and varied. The socioeconomic status, which is a huge continuum from the not haves to the ultra haves. The disability construct, which is understanding the beliefs and attitudes we have about disability and what our attitudes are around disability. Political affiliation, it's huge right now in America, particularly, but all over the world. This incredible divide. And our worldview is informed by our political affiliation. It's informed by our ethnicity and language, our racial construct, our gender identity or sexual orientation, as well as all the family stories. So we call these puzzle pieces because they inform our worldview, and they can harm us and they can help us. So let's just look at that. How might cultural patterns harm our ability to be kind to someone, to have curiosity, a really open curiosity, so we can have empathy and compassion. We'll start with the harm side. My cultural patterns cause all of my fear, despair, and doubt. They cause my bias, my discrimination, and my racism. I grew up in a military family that moved all over the world. I gained certain fears around other cultures. I gained doubts about the world. I had bias and discrimination and even racism built into the fabric of how I was brought up, how I lived and experienced the world around me. Cultural patterns also help us. They help. They're how we are taught about love, hope, and trust, about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I had just as powerful of experiences as each of you do in your own learning about what is love and where does it fit and how does it come into our framework of belonging in our groups, in our cultures, in our teams, even in our families. Whether we have hope about the future or despair, whether we can trust another group of people, another cultural group, or have bias, equity, inclusion, discrimination, racism. See how it all goes together. It's really quite remarkable. And the continuum of emotions that live in our experience as human beings goes from fear at one end of the spectrum to love, which is an exalted emotion at the far other end of the spectrum. And our cultural patterns, our attitudes, beliefs, and what we think is possible impact us in all of these ways. And they impact our ability to have curiosity and kindness. So I love to call these things, these patterns, our reactive patterns and our cultural patterns, our human condition. Because if I have all of these things, well, so does everyone else. It's really by definition. There isn't a person in your life who doesn't have protective patterns, who doesn't have cultural patterns that they may be completely biased to because they have not learned how to have more mindful consciousness to see beyond themselves. And that's built into their cultural pattern that we are right. I grew up in a family where our family, our way was the way, and people who weren't like us were not okay. Fortunately, I've had immense life experience at 70 years old now that has taught me to see through the veil, if you will, to our common humanity. And I love this saying. It's a quote that I came up with and use a lot. Every human being has impeccable reasons for behaving exactly as they do. Every human being, if we think about how they were brought up and what they were influenced by and how they were harmed and the trauma they experienced or the protective patterns that they developed, and sometimes are very rigid. Protective patterns can be extremely rigid. And anyone that I know is the way they are because of all of this, what we call our human condition. The choices that someone thinks they don't have, or they have, or has, can't get the words out of my mouth, our human condition. Impeccable reasons. So when we apply that to others, let's use this framework of looking through the lens of curiosity with kindness in order to access empathy and compassion. And we'll look at each of these parts a little more closely. And we'll start with curiosity, one of the resilient mindsets, because curiosity opens us up. Just take a moment here and pause inside with yourself and notice what it's like to be sort of on the stuck end of the spectrum with judgments, attitudes, and beliefs about someone or certain people or aspects of life. Could be the place we live in, people we have to work with. Well, experience all of that. And then compare that or shift that, explore inside yourself the experience of wonder and wondering and being curious about what the heck is going on for someone that they are the way they are. Because everyone has a reason. And lots of times it's hidden. I was just, I'm a black belt in Aikido, the peaceful martial art. And I've been training with this gentleman for quite some time, and he's pretty rigid and distant. And, I had empathy for him, but I just noticed all of that. Didn't know anything about him, and was out for coffee with him recently and discovered that he's lived an extraordinary life of trauma that shows up in how he presents himself, but is hidden when we don't know that. As a psychologist, I worked in schools for 25 years, and as we know clearly that bullies bully others because they were hurt, they were bullied, and I know that personally because I was a bully in middle school, I had a lot of trauma growing up: physical, emotional, sexual abuse, family alcoholism, yada, yada, yada. And I took it out on other kids because that's just what I needed to do. The human condition. Call it impeccable reasons. So what's going on? What's going on? So we're going to take this lens of curiosity and add it to choosing kindness, which is one of the relational connecting skills. Choosing kindness. The choice is mine to be kind. The choice is mine to be kind. Wow. Yeah, I can go into the grocery store and I can get in line, and I can be stressed out because it's not going fast enough, or I can be curious and interested in what's going on around me and what's going on for the person who's helping to check me out. And I can be kind. I can choose that. His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls his religion the religion of kindness. Buddhists don't call Buddhism a religion. It's a path, and His Holiness calls it the religion of kindness. The choice is mine to be kind, and I can kind of hear him saying it. So kindness. How can I act kindly in this situation? And how will it make a difference? How can my kindness help? So we have what I put together here for this webinar, what I call precious kindness. There's being kind to people who are kind. Helping. It's just makes us feel so good. And that comes from the process of contributing. Bonnie Bernard, one of the great researchers on resilience, says that contributing is one of the top 3 things that helps us be resilient, when we can contribute. And being kind, we are contributing literally to other people. We're contributing to their happiness. When we smile at someone with a smile of kindness, their mirror neurons see our smile and turn on their brain to feel more kindly and comforted. Precious kindness. So curiosity and kindness. We can take curiosity and kindness right into the act of empathizing. We have little taglines for all of our skills. Hearts grow wise when we empathize. And in this case, it's the mother with her son. She's clearly, empathizing. There's like something's happening. She's with him, being kind with him. Empathizing is a kind of kindness. And then we can take our curiosity and our empathy and our kindness, and we can apply it to what we might call precious pain. Precious pain. Someone else who is hurting. Life is difficult, and we can be pushed away from someone's difficulty. We can get defensive about it, but the reality is there's a human being who's suffering, and when we open our hearts and we get curious about what must be going on for them, we can be curious and we can be kind with someone else's precious pain. So it's all about the heart, really. Our heart either closes down or it opens up. My heart has been both closed down and open, and my heart has been broken open. Our hearts can be broken open by a grief. They can be broken open by an illness, and it's actually a beautiful thing to have your heart broken open, because it's so painful having our hearts closed. So let's look at the sequence and continuum here of compassion and empathy. And this comes from Harvard Business Review, and they put it on a continuum from pity, I feel sorry for you, sympathy, I feel for you. You know, I get what you're going through. I'm so sorry you're going through that. Empathy, which is feeling what someone else is feeling. It's I feel with you. You're going through it, and I'm feeling what you're feeling, and I'm getting what it is that you're feeling. To compassion, which I like to actually say I feel with you is empathy, and I feel for you, which is compassion. They call it I'm here to help. Compassion has an action-oriented part to it, but the action can be just extending loving kindness, extending loving kindness, extending kindness, extending curiosity. Those are compassionate acts. And we think about this whole continuum. There's some parts of it that are misunderstood, and particularly empathy. So let's look at empathy and compassion. I wrote empathy versus compassion. I don't really like that phrase. It's really empathy and compassion. So I will change that on my next slideshow. Empathy. I also write it as empathy to compassion. So this research comes from Matthew Ricard. It's a wonderful article, Empathy to Compassion in the Neuroscience Laboratory. And he and others, colleagues all over the world, working on the neuroscience, which is a miracle of what's being discovered today with so much information available. The way he writes about it is that our own transformation is triggered by empathy. Someone gets hurt, I start to feel it, which alerts me to the fact that they're suffering. Now, he then makes the point that excessive sharing of others' negative emotions is actually maladaptive, or can be, and it is the source of our burnout. So people say compassion fatigue. That's actually inaccurate. It's empathy fatigue. What they've discovered in the laboratory is when someone has too much empathy, sometimes we can be too sensitive and we're feeling what other people are going through and we're feeling what the world is going through. That takes a huge toll on us neurologically, emotionally, physiologically. It alters our immune system. Staying in empathy can be very destructive for our own heart, our body-mind system, and can be the source of burnout. In Buddhist study, when a novice or novitiate is learning how to have compassion, what they do is they teach the young monks to have empathy so fully in short bursts, but to go into meditation and feel that empathy enough to then what they call breaking the heart open to compassion. So there is a place for empathy, and we can do it right away, empathy to compassion. Now, I want to move this in another direction for a moment, and it's the direction towards self. So how do we have curiosity for what we're going through? How do we use kindness to ourselves? How do we have self-empathy and self-compassion, which allow us to be whole, allow us to be held by ourselves? Not that we don't need it from others, but we surely need it from ourselves. So here's a little piece from Kristen Neff at Stanford, research psychologist, and she teaches wonderful courses on self-compassion. And she said, how to get to self-compassion is to shift from self-criticism, the inner critic, the mental word chatter of putting ourselves down, which most of us do a lot, and moving that to kindness. So something happens and I say to myself, oh geez, I should have done that differently, or oh, I feel so bad that I did that, and move it to kindness. Oh geez, boy, I wish I'd done it differently, but I was doing the best I could. And Kristen Neff says the next part of self-compassion is shifting from an individual perspective to common humanity. So instead of just being all caught up in myself, like, oh, I do things wrong, or I'm not good enough, or I have a protective pattern, it's like, wait a minute, everybody has protective patterns. Everybody makes mistakes. Common humanity. We walk together in the field of the human condition. There isn't anything special about us. We can give ourselves a break. And we can do that by leaving the self-absorption of the individual place to become more mindful. And there are so many mindful practices. We teach them in all of the areas of our skills, centering for self, connecting with others, collaborating with the group. It's all filled with mindful practices. But we're not going to have time for that today, but I do want to go back to what happens when we don't have self-compassion, or we don't have empathy and compassion for others, if we don't use curiosity and kindness. And just have a few more minutes, but I'm going to run you through what we teach related to stress in a very simple way, because we all have personal stress. Life itself is stressful. Social dynamics, families are stressful, relationships are stressful, emotions are stressful. When we get into our worry, or we have anger, frustration, anxiety, getting exhausted is stressful. Burnout, our body needs recovery time. So what we teach at Dovetail is the stress curve, where we can move from noticing our stress reaction where we are losing our cool. There's an event, we have a reaction, we have protective patterns, it peaks, takes some time to calm down. We know neurologically and emotionally that a difficult stress reaction takes a number of hours to completely work through in a normal way, and there's a depletion afterwards. However, we also know that we can get better at it. We can learn how to keep our cool, and it's knowing what our protective patterns are. When I have it, I can see it, then I can get into curiosity and wonder and start choosing my skills, and I'm moving from my reactive pattern, my reaction, into curiosity about myself. Whoa, what just happened to me here? To wonder and assessment, to centering myself and calming down. And then there's one more piece to this, and that is looking ahead to anticipating our resilience, our needs for resilience. So we call it anticipatory stress. In our healthcare trainings, we work with doctors and healthcare providers a lot. We teach clinics this work so that they can use it for themselves and their patients. And there's a term in the medical world called anticipatory guidance. And anticipatory guidance is usually used in a medical way, but we've borrowed it and we use it as anticipatory guidance for one's own resilience and anticipatory guidance with a client or patient, so that that person can see what would be helpful, what are the anchors they can tie to. And in this case, we call it our resilience skills. We choose the resilience skill before we get to the stress event. We know there's going to be a difficult conversation. We have to have a parent conference with our kid's teacher. We have a difficulty with the neighbor. I've got to go across the fence and talk to the neighbor. What do I do to get myself resilient beforehand? So that's what we call starting fresh and staying in the zone. And our state of being is constantly going up and down. It's all about emotion. Our world, our lifeblood, the economy, for goodness sakes, is run by emotion. I was just reading an article in the New York Times. I forget who it was, one of my favorite people. The stock market moves according to emotion. When people are afraid, they do things that make it go down. When they're feeling hopeful and confident, it goes up. It's all emotional. Life is emotional, and emotions matter. And I love this quote from Oren J. Sofer. He's a Buddhist teacher. And he says, how we handle emotions, our own and others, can make or break a day, can make or break a relationship, can make or break our body, because the body keeps score. And so we begin to close. This quote from Gabor Mate: being cut off from our own natural self-compassion is one of the greatest impairments we can suffer. So if we step back from this whole exploration and think about our protective patterns and our cultural patterns and how we live inside of the larger common humanity, giving ourselves self-compassion is probably the most important thing that we can do. And it's presencing the miracle of life as all of life being precious. And for me, it comes down to love and compassion, really the elixir of how the world works when it's working. And I'm so glad you could join me today. It's just been a wonderful opportunity for me to share and get in touch with what I know about this process, and invite you to access our open education resources, download free digital stuff. You can join our trainings. We do trainings for all kinds of people. Reach out to me at chuck@dovetaillearning.org. Go on our website. You can purchase hard copies of our materials. Got one right here. This is the healthcare provider guidance book. If I hold it in the right spot, oops, I've got this darn thing here on my screen, which is in the way. Practical skills for resilience for healthcare providers. And with that, thank you again for being here. Thank you for helping to create a world of kind, connected human beings.